So I'm going to try and make a video here about the gift and the blessing that we received April 16th, 2022. The day my mom died, a year ago. So I've been talking about this April 19th date for a while now, that the gifts of Baal come on or around April 19th. Last year came for me on the 16th, and for many other people in my family. So April 19th, 2018, I found this implant. April 19th, 2018, I found this implant. April 19th, 2019, I took this trip to Independence, Missouri that was like a vision quest. I didn't hear from James True that the gifts of Baal come on or around April 19th until after the next anniversary. So I had the experience on April 19th, 2018, April 19th, 2019. The next date, April 19th of 2020, had already passed by the time I heard James say the gifts of Baal come on or around April 19th. And it made me do a double take because I had already recognized that both these events happened almost 1 year to the date, 4/20. And when I heard him say that, it made me do a double take. So the next 4/20 had already passed of 2020, and I was waiting for the April 19th of 2021 to see what would happen. And in my life, nothing significant happened. But on or around April 19th, 2022, my mom died April 16th, and on that day, we were shown that there is an afterlife. Because hours after she died, so did her worst enemy in this whole world. The one person who she held the most animosity and contempt and bitterness and hatred towards in her heart died a few hours later in a plasma fire. Even if you remove the plasma fire element from it, which multiplies the synchronicity or the coincidence by about 7 billion, because only 1 in 7 billion people, 8 billion, however many there are on the planet, 1 out of 8 billion people can show you and tell you about this fire that he died in, and that's Julie's son, who can show you the means by which he departed this world and show you some of the ways in which this type of energy works, the burn signatures it leaves behind, even without the plasma fire element being introduced into that equation. The implications of what happened on that day, it is a greater stretch of the imagination, a mental leap that's much further to chalk it up to random coincidence. One had nothing to do with the other. It was just random coincidence. It is much shorter leap of the mental leap, much fewer mental gymnastics that you have to contort your mind into to accept and acknowledge there is a relationship here between what happened between them in their life and what happened to both of them on the same day of their death. There is a relationship here. It is not a random coincidence, but both of these events coincide with an orchestrating, coordinating force, an intelligence. That the things that happened between them during their life were cause of what happened to both of them on the day of both of their death as an effect. The implications here are that there is a performance record, a life review, that even shit you think you got away with 50 years ago is still on that record and you are held accountable for it. The other implication here is that there is a life beyond death, a world beyond death, and that is the real world. Because from that side of the veil of death, you can reach back into this world and have devastating consequences and effects. From this world, you can't reach into that world. You don't have any powers of levers of power in this world to reach into that world and affect people's lives. it is apparent that you have a lever of power from that world to reach into this world and affect people in ways that we saw on the day where, hours after my mom died and went into that world, someone pulled some levers and reached back into this world and pulled Mike Smith out of this world into that world beyond death. Along with one of his sons, Ronnie, and his other son's girlfriend. 3 people died in that plasma fire. One of his sons, Glenn, had just stepped out on the front porch for a cigarette, and when the fire ignited, it blew the front door off of their fucking house and blew him off of the porch out into the front yard. He was able to get back into the house and pull his mom out of the house before she burned. But Mike, Ronnie, and Glenn's girlfriend died that day, hours after my mom did. And to chalk this up to a random coincidence that one had nothing to do with the other, and it's all just random events that have nothing to do with one another, there is no relationship between these things, is a huge mental leap. Those are mental gymnastics that are far harder to stretch your mind around than to accept. There is a relationship between the fact that Mike molested her and she hated him for the past 50 years with a passion, and that on the day of her death, he died shortly thereafter in a mysterious fire that is mysterious to everyone in the world except Julie's son. Not such a mystery to him. He can point out the patterns, the burn signatures, the way in which this works. And he is the only one out there who can show you and tell you about this plasma, this type of energy, in the way that he can. So that multiplies the coincidence by about 1 in 7 billion. But even setting aside the plasma fire factor, that's the means by which he departed this world, even her brother, Tim, said it looks like my sister finally got her vengeance. And I'm going to segue here through a couple of 2 or 3 step segue to willful ignorance, where people willfully ignore and deny and refuse to accept what it is they can see. When it comes to plasma fire, and when it comes to my mom's final will and testament on the day of her death, her will was that he suffer for her entire life. And her testament on the day of her death, through actions that speak louder than words, she testified to the fact that there is an afterlife. And there is a lifelong performance record that is kept with precision, and no one gets away with anything. Everyone is held accountable for the things that they did in this life. And she proved that through actions that speak louder than words. And she announced that to everyone in the family that knows the relationship between Mike Smith and Julie. Many people refuse to see it. They engage in willful ignorance. Tim was able to see it, and he said it. My sister finally got her vengeance. Doug was able to see it for a couple of days, and then he talked himself out of it. I only heard about this fire a couple of days after my mom and Mike died on the same day. Once I went back to work, one of our coworkers named Nick started telling me, yeah, so what's with this fire and your other family member that died? I said, well, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, Doug was telling me he was all freaked out. All freaked out that this guy, your cousin or someone your mom hated, someone she really didn't like, died on the same day. I said, was it Mike Smith? And he's like, I don't remember the name, and I don't remember the exact relationship of the person who it was, but it was just like a friend of the family or some sort of distant relative that she fucking hated that died that same day in a fire. Said, I don't know. He's like, yeah, when Doug was telling me, he was all freaked out about it. The fact that he was all freaked out about it means he could see it for what it was. He could see the implications of what this means. This means that there is a afterlife, a world after death, from which levers were pulled to reach back into this world and cause an effect that makes an announcement to everyone indicating there is an afterlife. There is a performance record of all the deeds that you've done in this life that you are held accountable for in the next life. And that is the real world, and this is the subordinate or fake world. Because from in that world, you can reach into this world and cause major effects. Drastic, detrimental changes to people's lives, even ending them. You cannot do anything like that from this world reaching into the other world. But apparently, you can reach from the world after death back into the earthly world and have these effects. That means that world is the real world. We here are subordinate to levers of power and authority that exist there. They are not under levers of power and authority that exist that we can pull here to cause effects in that world. But apparently they can cause effects in our world. That world is the real world. We are subordinate to that world. But some people refuse to see, and this is where that serenity of acceptance of things I cannot change comes in through the Serenity Prayer. You know, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I've come to realize through my life experience, that poem or song or prayer has it backwards, and that nothing is granted. There is no granting me the serenity. You earn it by conjuring the courage to change the things you can and applying yourself accordingly. And through that process, you earn the wisdom to know the difference between that which you can change and that which you cannot change. And only after you've applied yourself 100%, not 99.9, but 100%, will you have the serenity to accept something that you cannot change. Because if you give it anything less than everything you've got, there will be some place in your mind that says, well, I gave it 99%. Maybe if I'd have given it 100%, I could have changed that thing. But once you've given it 110%, you've earned the wisdom to know the difference between that which you can and cannot change. And thus, you will be able to accept with a sense of serenity that that is something you were unable to change. If seeing what Doug was able to see on the day of my mom's death won't change his ways, and he keeps living like there's no tomorrow, acting like you won't be held accountable for anything you do, and you get away with everything that no one caught you for, if what he saw on that day won't change him, nothing will. And just like plasma fire, people engage in willful ignorance. They look away. They deny it. Even though they can see it for what it is, they pretend that they can't see it. Just like Doug could see that for what it was for the first couple days. When he called Nick and told Nick about it, and he was all freaked out, that means he could see what the implications were. And then he talked himself out of seeing it so he could go back to living his life the way he's always lived it. As if there is no performance record for which you will be held accountable. As if you think you got away with something and you did it in the private where no one was watching. People do the same thing with plasma fire. Willful ignorance. They choose not to see it. They turn a blind eye and pretend as if they can't see it, even though they can see it. Because the implications change everything about your whole world. You recognize all the people around you are blind and cannot see it. You recognize the institutions around you are keeping you in the dark and withholding this information from you. And thus, it is just more easy, more comfortable, and more convenient to pretend as if you don't see that thing and carry on with life as you've always been living it, rather than to acknowledge it for what it is and respond appropriately and accordingly. So, I think the announcement my mom made on the day of her death, the announcement that she made, her testimony, her testament, through actions that speak louder than words, is something that deserves more attention than anyone's willing to give it. Because when you acknowledge and recognize it for what it is, and the implications of what it says and what it means you didn't get away with anything, even things that you think you got away with 50 years ago. There is still a record of, and you will be held accountable for. It means there is a life after this life, a world after this world, beyond the veil of death. And that world is the real world. Enter here, the song, Tryouts for a Human Race. I'm just going to try and breeze through this segment real quick because it's not worth bringing down my vibe. I value the currency of time and attention. You spend time like currency, like money, and you pay attention like currency, like money. Witness is paying attention. Whatever you spend your time paying attention to, you are devoting your witness to that thing. And I value my witness and my attention more so than most. And so I don't like to allow my vibe to come down. But in alignment with this whole segment that we've been talking about, how there is a life review, a performance record of your entire life. And here I want to insert that when that performance record is reported on, performance improves. This is a an aphorism or truism. Anyone performing anything, whether it's a musical instrument, your daily task at work, in an actor, in a play, anything, any performance, and your life in general, the performance of your behavior in your life. When people know that their performance is being recorded, their performance improves. When that performance record is reported on, the rate of improvement increases. Your life has a performance record that will be reported on. And when it is reported on, your improvement will increase. When you discover that there is a performance record, your behavior will improve. When that performance record is reported on, your rate of improvement will increase. Some people refuse to acknowledge that there is a performance record in order that they don't have to improve their behavior, in order they can go back to living the life all the way they've always been living it. Because if they are to acknowledge and accept, this means that there is a performance record, this means that we didn't get away with anything, then they would have to improve their behavior, wouldn't they? As a natural consequence of finding out and discovering your performance is being recorded. So they block that out. They engage in disassociation. They pretend that didn't happen. For a couple days afterwards, he was all freaked out, recognizing the implications of what this means. It means you're being recorded and you didn't get away with anything. And your behavior, your performance during this life has a record. Which means, as a natural resulting consequence of discovering that, your behavior would improve. In order to go back and not to the way of life that I've always been living and not change anything about my behavior, I'm going to pretend I didn't see that. I'm going to talk myself out of acknowledging and accepting what I just witnessed, her final testament. That's the day he bought a gun. In addition to some of the videos that I've made, I think I titled them For the Record. When I came home off the road in 2013, and I found these holes in the bathroom wall that I had brought to the attention of my mom and Doug 10 years earlier, when it was his daughters using that bathroom, when those holes in the wall grew from the size of a BB to the size of your thumb, and his daughters were plugging those holes with tissue paper because they knew it was their dad on the other side of the wall. who would hear the water turn on every morning when they take a shower and run downstairs into the heater room to get an eyeful. 10 years earlier, in about 2003, I brought these to the attention of my mom and Doug, and he said, "Oh, that must have been the person that lived here before us." His daughters know damn well it wasn't the person who lived there before them. But we plastered over those holes and painted the bathroom in 2003, and 10 years later, in 2013, when I come back off the road and see that those same holes have reappeared in the same spot, and bring it to the attention of my mom and Doug once again, he gets hostile with me, calls the cops on me to have me removed from the property, and then bought a gun the next day. Because a day or two later, Spencer tells me, "I saw Doug today. He showed me his new gun, a 38 or a 45 or whatever it was." And that was the same day that he told Spencer, "What are you doing talking to Jeff? Don't talk to Jeff. He's the enemy." And Spencer said, "Well, he's always been a friend to me. I don't know what you mean. He's never been my enemy." There is someone witnessing your behavior. That is what he bought a gun to defend himself against. My witness and my testimony. And it is pathological to think that you can buy a gun to defend yourself against someone's witness of your behavior and their testimony. This is a performance record being reported on. This is where your performance is being recorded in my witness. This is where your performance record is being reported on in my testimony. And a gun does not protect you from having consequences of your own behavior. And there is a witness of your entire life, even the things you think you got away with in secret 50 years ago that no one can prove, you are held accountable for. That is the implication of what was shown to us on the day of Mom's death, that was followed shortly, hours later, by Mike's death, is that there is a correlation between what happened between the two of them in life and what happened on the day of both of their deaths. There is a correlation here. It is a coincidence. These things coincide, not randomly, without any connection between the two. They coincide with an orchestrating, coordinating force that made it very glaringly obvious to anyone who's willing to see it for what it is. Like her brother that said, "It looks like my sister finally got her vengeance." The synchronicity between what happened in their life and how much she hated him, and then what happened on the day of her death, and hours later he went too, shows that there is a relationship here between the events that happened between them in life and the event that happened on the day of both of their deaths. And it is a greater leap of the imagination to try to chalk it up to random chance and say it's just a random coincidence. There is no relationship here. There is no cause and effect. Relationship here is mental illness at its highest level. Denial, cognitive dissonance, dissociative identity disorder, splitting your brain into a compartment, separating that out and setting it aside. Because if you were to incorporate that into the rest of your self-image and worldview, you would have to change everything about your self-image and worldview, especially someone who's been living their life like they got away with stuff in private, like there's no performance record review, like there is no consequences to anything that they've done. If they are to incorporate the significant meaning and the implications of these actions that spoke louder than words and the message that comes with them, that there's an afterlife, a performance record, and accountability, if they are to incorporate that into the rest of their self-image and worldview, it means they're going to have to change a lot of things, their ways of life, their behavior, and acknowledge all those things they've been doing because they thought they would get away with anything they could, that they didn't get away with anything. That requires a lot of accommodation in order to adapt to this new knowledge and understanding that was delivered to you on the day of her death. So instead, you disassociate from it. You compartmentalize it. You pretend as if you don't know what you knew for those first couple days when you were all freaked out telling Nick, holy fuck, the day she died, hours later, her worst enemy, her worst adversary, the one person in this fucking whole world that she hated the most, left this world hours later. When you're all freaked out, you recognize the implications and the meaning of that. But then you talk yourself out of knowing what you know in order that you can go back to doing life, behaving the same way that you always have, in order that you don't have to burn the calories necessary that it would take in order to adapt to this new reality that you've been shown. You would have to accommodate and make a lot of changes. Recognize that your performance is being recorded, and therefore your behavior and your performance would improve. Because you don't want to do that. You pretend as if you don't even know what you were just shown, that your performance is being recorded. And there is a performance record that will be reported on. And his performance record, Mike Smith, was reported on in actions that speak louder than words. And it was announced to everyone. There is an accountability process after death. And that no one got away with anything, even if they think they did from 50 years ago. That's not how this works. Everything you've done is on record. And your performance record has an accounting process that happens after death. And it is swift. It didn't take years. Within hours, that accounting process took effect. And that wasn't the final payment that he died, or died a little bit earlier than he would have died. That was him being summoned before the judge, to appear before the judge. Him leaving this world a couple years earlier than he might have otherwise was not the ultimate consequence and the price he pays for the things he did in this life. That was him being summoned to appear before the judge regarding those things that he had done in this life. So if you've been living a good life, you like the idea that there is accountability and that no one got away with anything and that everyone will receive their just rewards for the things that they've done. If you've been living a good life, you like the idea of that concept. If you've been not living a good life, you don't like that idea. You thought you were going to escape out the backside of this world, and whatever you got away with, you got away with. And you never had to pay for any of that. There's a philosophy that I've been living my life by since very early on, before I ever really had any knowledge or belief in God and whatever, that starts out as synchronicity. You're like, oh, wow, there was a synchronicity there. Right as I had this thought and we were having this conversation, that other thing happened that seemed to synchronize with this. It's weird. And those synchronicities turn into a belief in God when you recognize the source of those synchronicities is interacting with me personally. That's when you've crossed the line into crazy land. It's one thing to recognize synchronicities and that these things coincide, a coincidence, but not randomly. There has to be some coordinating, orchestrating force that makes these two incidences coincide with one another, not through random chance, but through some sort of orchestrating, coordinating force that organizes and orchestrates all of this. That's the early onset understanding of God. When you start to recognize that coordinating, orchestrating force that creates these synchronicities and coincidences in the world around you is directly interacting with you personally, that's when you come to know God. But long before I came to have an understanding of God, and maybe even before I was starting to see the earliest synchronicities, there was someone who said something, I don't remember where I heard it. It was the rocking chair theory. Live a good life, do good things in this world, because eventually, even if you don't believe in God or an afterlife or any of that shit, you believe in the rocking chair. You'll reach a point where you're so old you won't be making any new memories. You're over the hill. You spend most of your time sitting in a rocking chair thinking about, remembering, and reliving the experiences of your past. So live a good life, because you're going to relive those experiences over and over and over when you reach that rocking chair that you're sitting in as an old man. And something about that stuck. I was like, yeah. And that developed into me having a personal performance record. Even if no one saw me do it, I saw me do it. And I don't want to have to look back on what I did with shame and guilt and humiliation. So I'm not going to do this, even though no one's looking and I can get away with it. I'm looking, and I can't get away with lying to myself. When I'm in that rocking chair, I'm going to remember what I did here. And I don't want to have to relive such an experience, so I'm not going to act in such a way. The rocking chair theory served as a... See, your conscience is what prevents you from engaging in immoral and unethical behavior. When you have a fully functioning conscience, that is what would prevent you from doing low down, dirty, rotten things you'd be ashamed and humiliated about when no one's looking, because your conscience would prevent you from doing that because you're looking. But you short circuit and circumvent your conscience a little bit here, a little bit there, all the way through life, thinking you can just get away with lying a little here, cheating a little there, stealing a little there. Long as no one notices, long as no one else knows and catches you, and then you end up engaging in behavior that I'm not ashamed and humiliated, embarrassed, as long as no one knows I'm doing this. Because your own conscience is not preventing you, saying, I know that you're doing this, you know that you're doing this, and therefore you should feel ashamed and humiliated, and that conscience would prevent you from engaging in such behavior, such shameful behavior. But you short circuit your conscience. You circumvent it. You disintegrate your character. That means not all pieces are connected and integrated, but you disintegrate, disconnect your conscience that would prevent you from engaging in more immoral and unethical behavior in order that you can do so and think that as long as no one else sees me doing this, as long as no one else knows that I've done this, I can walk around with my head held high and feel just fine about myself because my conscience is disconnected and doesn't prevent me from doing such immoral, unethical, and shameful things. But after death, you will judge yourself with your conscience fully intact, with a greater clarity than you had even in the moment of the experience. With every thought, feeling, smell, touch, taste that you were having in the moment, without the distortion of you contorting the experience to believe what you want to believe and not believe what you don't want to believe, to see what you want to see and not see what you don't want to see, to know what you want to know and not know what you don't want to know, because it's convenient and comfortable to know and see and believe and think this, and it's very inconvenient and uncomfortable to know and see and think and believe that. Thus, you create your own reality of experience based on whatever's most comfortable and personally convenient for you to believe and think and know and see. But when you re-experience your life with your conscience fully intact, you will have a greater clarity and definition and resolution of what's actually happening in there, in that moment of experience, for every moment throughout your whole life. And you won't be trying to defend your behavior, which is what you do now. See, you can look back on yourself 20 years ago and acknowledge the behavior you engaged in 20 years ago, the faults and the flaws and the shortcomings of your own behavior from 20 years ago, because you no longer are that person. You're like, yeah, I was a dumbass here, and I was selfish there, and I was greedy there. But I can see it and acknowledge it and admit it now because I'm no longer that person. That's who I was 20 years ago. When you're looking down on this life from above, and you're no longer that person who you are currently in this meat suit, You will not be trying to defend and justify all of your behavior. You will be able to see it for what it was, with all of its shortcomings, flaws, and faults. Unlike the behavior we engage in now, which is defending anything and everything we do as if it's all great, good, perfect, moral, and ethical, you will be able to look back on your life and see it for what it was, because you no longer are that person. Therefore, you no longer have that personal attachment to defend and justify and rationalize everything that that person did, because just like looking back on yourself 20 years ago, you no longer are that person. So you can see that their behavior for what it was, including the shortcomings and faults and flaws. So know better and do better. Recognize now your life is being recorded. Yeah. Your performance, your behavior is being recorded. Let that knowledge of you being recorded improve your behavior. And know that there is going to be a performance record report. Your performance record will be reported on. If nothing else, back to you personally. You see, it doesn't distinguish or clarify. I actually heard this phrase in a business meeting, a sales meeting of other salespeople, but they heard this from President Monson of the LDS Church. And it applies to everything from business to religion to personal life. But the catch is the person has to know that they're being recorded. The phrase is that when performance is recorded, their performance improves. When that performance record is reported on, the rate of improvement increases. There's two variables that it doesn't include. Reported on to who? You can report about their performance back to the individual who made the performance, or to their colleagues and coworkers, or to their parents or their children or the general public. It really doesn't matter. As soon as you take their performance record and report it to somebody, their rate of improvement increases. Their behavior, their performance improves when they know that they're being recorded, when they know that their performance is being recorded. But if they walk around completely oblivious and unaware of the fact that their performance is being recorded, their behavior doesn't improve. So you can record their performance all day long. Their performance doesn't improve unless they know that their performance is being recorded. That's the caveat that's not included in the abbreviated statement about how performance improves when it's recorded, and when a performance record is reported on, the rate of improvement increases. That's the catch. They have to know that they're being recorded for the behavior to improve. And even if that performance record is reported on back to the person who is engaging in the performance, who is performing the act, that rate of improvement still increases no matter who. But they have to know that that their performance record is being reported to their colleagues, to their coworkers, to their boss, to their employees. It doesn't matter. So know better, do better, and recognize your life, your behavior is a performance that is being recorded. And your performance record is going to be reported on. If nothing else, back to you personally. And you will no longer have the self-defense mechanisms of denial, deflection, disassociation, cognitive dissonance to try to contort your perception into defending and justifying and rationalizing everything you did as moral and ethical and good. You will see it for what it is when your performance record is reported on back to you, and you are no longer attached to this life and this world, and you are no longer interested in defending all of the behavior you have engaged in. You will see it for what it was. So that was the gift part of the gift of ball. Gift of ball just basically means a blessing in disguise. People have heard that phrase before, a blessing in disguise. What's the disguise? On the surface, it looks like a tragedy, something bad, a crisis. But beneath the surface, you recognize it was a blessing. There was something beneficial about that experience. And that was the gift that we were given April 16th, 2022. The day my mom died, and hours later, Mike died. And through actions that speak louder than words, you were delivered a message that told you there's an afterlife. And from that world, levers were pulled, decisions were made to reach back into this world and pull Mike through the veil as well. That message also includes the understanding that there is a life record, a performance record of the things that you did. And you didn't get away with things that you thought you got away with 50 years ago. That message, that understanding, that final testimony that was delivered to us through actions that speak louder than words, that was the gift that you were given on that day. Or you can reject it and say, I don't know that to be true. No, I don't know that. That way I can just keep going about my business as I always have. Or you can accept that that's what you were delivered on that day, was a message of truth through the proof of your own life experience. And if that doesn't reach you, nothing ever will.